Okay, good evening everyone, and how is everybody feeling? It's snowing outside and it's getting colder by the minute. So let's warm up. And last time when we met, we were talking about how can you protect yourself from the exchange rate risks. And tonight, what you're going to learn is if you are maybe interested in applying for a job working for a multinational company, and how can human resource management select exactly you and nobody else but you for that particular assignment. So we're going to talk about international human resource management. And these are some of the topics that we'll be talking tonight about. So we will talk about challenges of international business, examples, list of briefly describe the main methods for staffing, important issues to keep in mind of training, appraising, and compensation of international employees. By the way, what do you think when the company is sending somebody overseas? Meaning outside Russia, for example, or outside Germany, are they going to pay those individuals more or less than they will be paying them if they are working in their home office in Russia or in Germany? Why more?
Because if they come from Russia, they need to spend more in overseas, and that's it. Or maybe to make this employee look better for the company.
Very good. Yes, you will see. I have actually few examples. They will be actually paid more, and Tanya is absolutely right for different reasons. Because cost of living can be much higher than there in Russia, for example. But also sometimes companies want to portray that their company is really very important, and they will not allow their personnel to work at the, let's say, apartments that are really very, very low and not really that luxurious and so forth. So we'll find out how they're going to decide about that. And finally, we will talk about some human resource management programs. We already talked, during all these weeks and all these classes, we talk about globalization and importance of international business, and definitely companies are recognizing challenges that are coming from this globalization. At one hand, they, in a certain way, need to actually go overseas in order to increase their revenues, or maybe just to diversify their operations, or just for the prestige purposes to be and have a subsidiary on, or maybe some representative office overseas. And from the standpoint of human resources, that will mean that they will actually have to make up their decision. How much is that HR, human resources management, going to be centralized, meaning coming from that headquarters, and how much freedom they're going to give to those local offices abroad? Those are some of the challenges. Obviously, one very important one is how are we going to select that the right person with right skills will go overseas and represent our company? So that's very, very important one. The next one is how are we going and what are we going to do in order to spread this state-of-the-art knowledge across all our subsidiaries and all our representative offices around the world. And finally, identifying and developing talent on a global basis. Nowadays, a lot of experts in HR are basically saying that it's really, really important to know how to develop talent. And it's not only one of those things that the company will say, okay, we are here to develop talent, but they actually have to prove that they are doing it. And again, not only talent at the home office, but talent in all their offices around the world where they have their representation. As you can see here, like we were talking about international business and why it is different than doing it domestically, Because companies and individuals who are sent on those assignments will have to deal with different cultures. They will also have to deal with the different economic systems. They will also have to deal with different labor relations, and they will also have to deal with different political and legal systems. And if you want to make your life even more complicated, this is how all of those things can look like, where you have like examples of, obviously language is not only the one that we are talking, but it's also nonverbal communication. Do we have knowledge of all of that? How I'm going to read somebody who is not responding to me? Does that mean that he or she is in disagreement with me? Or is it that just the cultural characteristics that they need more time to reflect? So they're not necessarily going to jump immediately once I give them my proposal. There are different laws all around the world, and so that can actually complicate human resource management, because what is legal in one country and human resource practices in one country may not necessarily be actually applicable to another country. And I will give you an example. It was one company, a US company, and they're operating in one European country. And basically in United States, it's in particularly certain states, much more easy to lay off a person. And so you don't even need to give that much explanation. However, obviously in Europe, where they have a little bit more regulated labor market, it's not that easy. So what happened was that the company pretty much laid off the worker, but since they didn't submit that in writing, he actually continued going to work and basically asked for compensation because he was told, but it wasn't being sent to him in a written form, so therefore that was not valid in that particular country. There are obviously political issues, religious issues, social organization, education. If you send somebody abroad, you are most likely sending their family abroad. Is there an education abroad for their children? Is it in a language that they can actually immediately start attending those schools? All those questions may not necessarily sound that complicated, but they do really complicate life of all those expatriates who are sent abroad, because if their family is not happy, if the children are not happy, if the spouse is not happy, guess what? This is number one reason why US expatriates fail. This is number one reason why they actually come back home sooner than their assignment is about to expire. And again, from the HR standpoint of view, we definitely need to think about how are we going to select the best person for the best job? Who is going to do an appraisal, performance appraisal? Is it going to be a home office, in the headquarters, or is it going to be an office in that particular country? What about training? And finally, again, how we are going to compensate people. Now we are going to cover each of those. Okay. Basically, when we are thinking who are we going to apply and where the best candidates are, we have three general options. Option number one will be home office. So if I'm a Russian company, I'm going to look for the people who are already working for my company in Russia. Another option it can be, well, maybe we can do and find the best candidate in the host country, meaning like if Russian company is going to Germany, maybe the best candidate will be a person who lives in Germany. And finally, the third option, so this will be the first one, home country nationals, and then finally the third country nationals. This case will be when we are really not limiting ourselves to people who are either working for my company, running from my country, nor the people who are actually in that particular country, but I'm really looking for the best global candidate. So I'm opening these positions to everyone around the world. And now we are going to see also what are the benefits of that, and then I will come. So basically, we have the first one when I'm employing a Russian and I'm sending overseas will be ethnocentric. Then we have polycentric when I'm actually employing the local person in that country. And geocentric will be I'm really looking for the best candidate. Okay. Now, we also have something that is called offshoring. Have you heard about that term offshoring? What will that mean? I have the definition of that, but have you heard about that one and the whole process that is going on with that one? This is with definitely globalization. This particular process became very, very significant. And what does it mean? It basically means I can produce in my home country. And because of, let's say, higher level of development, when I'm using people in my home country, I have to pay them higher. Or because of all those technological changes, because of this internet that works 24 hours, I actually can have and employ people that are far away from my country. Who is using that very often? Banking industry is using this very often. Why? Because you go to a bank, and usually banks work in Russia from 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock until 7, 6, okay. However, what the customers will like, really customers will like the next day, the next morning when they go to that bank, that everything that they actually send that application for, is it a loan or who knows what, they want that to be processed the first thing that when they come back to that office. And of course, who is going to process that in Russia? You know, people are going to go and sleep. So what we do instead, we actually look for offshore and offshore offices and offshore services where maybe somebody who is in a different time zone will do that for us. So that's, and of course, you have to have a lot of things here in place. So the first one is obviously language. You can't send this offshore somewhere where people don't speak your own language. So that would be really quite inappropriate to do and quite expensive. But recently what is happening, particularly in the United States, we have the whole new trend that all of those offshore businesses are in a certain way coming back to the United States for different reasons. But one of those reasons was because very often those jobs were mostly in service industry. And American customers are, believe it or not, but very demanding in the quality of service that they expect from the people who are working in that industry. So they start complaining. And instead of, let's say, if you call Delta, which is one of the biggest American airline companies, and you want a reservation or you want to change something, and you are calling them, you know, like 3 o'clock in the morning, the New York Times, obviously it's not that the American individual will be picking up the phone. It will be somebody from another part of the world. So they start complaining, and some of those businesses are actually coming back to United States. I actually have students, a number of them, who were working in IT industry, because a lot of those jobs that are offshore are, again, coming from that IT industry. And it was kind of weird situation, because they were sent overseas to train personnel, let's say in India, that are going to replace them. So they are sent to train them, and once they train them, they're actually going to lose their jobs. So those are the realities of globalization. And again, how we are going to do that screening, how we are going to do that selection of the best candidate. believe it or not, nowadays, at least in the United States, but I think in other countries as well, a lot of those HR managers, when they're screening who is the best candidate, they're not only screening that individual who applied for a job, they actually screen the whole family. What does that mean? They want to know that the members of that family, is it the wife, is it the husband, children, and all of that, are they going to be able to adapt to this new environment? Why do you think that it is very important for the whole family to adapt?
I think it's important because if in case some member of family would not adapt, this family will go back and use money.
It was actually a lot of money, and if the person who was sent to fulfill those obligations returns sooner, that is usually very costly, and it costs 3 and sometimes 4 times more than their actually salary was. So that's why it's very, very important to be sure that not only individual with their professional, cultural, and communication characteristics will be a good fit, but really that the whole family will be easily to adapt. And also, it's very important to do this realistic preview. Basically, it is really important to be honest. So to tell that potential candidate, this is what you have to expect if you go to this country. These are the circumstances that you will be faced with. This is the lifestyle that they conduct. This is like when do you get up, what about the roads, what about the culture, what about anything, so that both sides will be well informed before making that decision. Should they have this candidate or should that candidate really accept this particular job? And I gave here a table where you can see we have some, as always in life, positive and negative sides of all our free options. Should I go with the host country, where let's say I'm a Russia company and I'm going to Germany? Should I go with employing Germans? Should I go with my personnel in Russia, or should I look actually for the best candidate wherever that best candidate in the world is? So who is going to read all of that and then maybe just explain me 2 of those concepts? How do you understand this? What are the benefits of employing this particular individual with those particular positive sides? So host country will be then Germany. I'm going to go with them because they cost less. If there is a preference of host country government, which means, if you are employing local people, there is more likelihood that the local government will embrace your presence there because you're increasing employment over there. They will know the environment, so they will know those local laws, they will know that local language. And if you go, however, with a Russian coming from Russia, going to Germany, the benefits of that will be, of course, I don't need to train them. They're already in my company. They already know the way we do business. They already know this culture of the company. There is a greater control because their alliance is with the Russian headquarters. Their alliance is not with the German. Over here, you can actually question who are they, where is their alliance, more important to the Germany or to the Russian company? They're obviously experience provided to corporate executives. And then again, if I go with the option that the best candidate is no matter where, obviously those people are for sure more adaptable because they're already having their assignments in different parts of the world. They already talk and speak and understand different languages and different cultures. So that can be the advantage of all of that. And here is the list of all those characteristics that the company or HR will be looking. And so maybe here somebody will help me by selecting one or two and just explaining to me what do you mean by this and how will this be actually positively affecting selection of that individual with those traits, with those characteristics.
I mean, okay, maybe positive self-image in subchapter flexibility, adaptability is important due to because it's about impression a person executes on others, and so without positive self-image, you could not present yourself and therefore be well graded by others. And yeah, kind of.
And also, if you have positive self-image and you present the company has positive image.
Well, definitely. Again, I will be posting this for your reference. You will have all of those, and then you can actually maybe go over a few times. Or maybe if you become one of those HR of those big corporations, one day when you start selecting, you will remember this class tonight that we had, and this minus 17 degrees outside, and then you said, oh, yeah, I remember this. I'm going to use this. Now, this is what I was telling you about with the particularly American expatriates. By the way, the term that we use, expatriate, that means the person who is sent on that assignment abroad. And as you can see here, it's a very, very, very high failure rate, in a sense that a lot of them return before their assignment is over. On average, 16 to 40%, but almost 70% when they're sent to less developed countries. Why do you think that there is such a high failure rate, particularly of American expatriates? Why they can't stay in that foreign country for that long? What's going on here?
Because they used to live in very comfortable conditions, and while in developing countries, their lifestyle had to be changed, and that's why they don't really like it, and they know, give me back my low salary, but take me home, please.
I'm not sure about that part with the low salary, but yes, take me home.
Maybe because of the language as well, because for example in Kazakhstan or like other post-Soviet countries, you know, like their home language, the language of the country, maybe Russian and also English. Like.
Very, very good. Okay, thank you. And again, those are the reasons why they fail. And as you can see, one of the reasons is that family is not basically happy, so they are returning. Personnel intentions, personality of expatriates, inability of spouse to adjust, inability to cope with overseas responsibilities, and lack of cultural skills. And now you're going to see and compare two different countries, and I want you to tell me why there is a huge discrepancy between those two countries. One is Japan, another one is US. And I know that we have people here who know everything about Japan, so maybe you will help us here to understand why the reasons for failure or returning sooner back home in Japan. Japanese firms are this list of factors, and why in the United States is the other list of factors. Yep.
Well, I would probably say that in the case of Japanese firms, is it just those Japanese workers who would send abroad. So because Japan in common was a very closed country for a very long time, and the cultural aspects of that country is very different, and well, inability to cope with larger overseas responsibilities and difficulties with the new environment, I think basically it doesn't actually matter where they go. It will be a lot of differences between the cultures, and that is like one of the main aspects of the life. That's why it was hard for Japanese. Maybe because of the values, and maybe because US workers were more often who has spouse and Japanese, because they like hard workers and they don't actually involved in the spec. Well, I have one mm, idea that usually in Japan, the men may be assigned overseas, and the women in Japan actually they in the lower like floor level, and they just um, do what their mind says, and that is why they can adapt to the um, overseas, because they just sit home. And US, the women are more like connected with the society, and they work outside. That is why they cannot adapt to the overseas society.
Very, very good. Okay, Nikita, something else or?
I had the same idea about the difference in mentality. Like Europeans and citizens of US have more connections with the family, and the family is more valuable for them than work. While Japanese and other Eastern guys, because of their number, I guess, really appreciate their job and really want to get more from their jobs. Yeah, and it's more important for them than family.
Thank you. I have one. I remember one student from Taiwan, and he basically said, "They said, what do you do there?" And he said, "Work, work, 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 work." Now, what HR, human resources, could do in order to make this transition more successful? Well, again, it's very important to be realistic and, as I said, honest at the beginning, to really present what are the characteristics of that particular country from political, economic, social, and cultural aspects. Then there has to be done, obviously, careful screening in order to be sure that you're selecting the right and most appropriate individual. Improve orientation. When you are already deciding who you're going to send, now you have to actually educate them and train them. Cultural and language training, and finally improve benefits packages. Now let's see how each of those look like. Pre-departure training. You will definitely like to inform a potential candidate or actually selected candidate about the business and culture in that particular country and everyday life. How does it look like to live over there? It will be very good and beneficial if that individual will speak foreign language or language of that country. It will be also very beneficial if maybe some members of their family will also speak that foreign language, so they will not feel in a certain way like ostracized. Like think about somebody coming to Russia with not knowing anything to say in Russian. It is quite challenging. I mean, not knowing anything. Not that you cannot survive, but it's quite challenging. When we're talking about training, what is really good is to use already people in your company with an experience of this international exposure, with this international assignment. So that is what we mean with this global mindset. let's have one-on-one, select a mentor for that new selected individual to go to that country and let him or she talk to another person who already have been there. So that's the best way how they can, in a certain way, firsthand realize, this is how it looks like, and so they can actually, train them and mentor them. What also can work very good, and definitely to have those cross-cultural training. What do you do in that country and what you don't do in that country. And rotating assignments when you will be sending people to different positions around the world as well. Any questions that you have? How many of you are now thinking, oh gosh, I would like to actually get a job in the company and go on this international assignment somewhere in the world? How many of you are? Just raise your hands. Okay, great. So why will you like to go overseas?
Because it's a new experience and it can broaden my mind, I think. That's all.
What about...
Well, besides obvious new experience, I get raise more money.
You know why you're actually taking cross-cultural studies as your major and economics as your minor? I think it's the other way around. Anybody else who raised the hand would like to share why? Okay.
For me, it's also ability to get more comfortable with the political environment and cultural environment.
Great. Well, I see some very, very good candidates for all those overseas assignments, and I hope that all those people who are watching us know that, and they will be sending you, invitations to apply for jobs in their companies. There are like different types of cross-cultural training. The basic one is really the cultural briefing. So, what is about culture, customs, traditions, and everyday behavior. The other one is already a little bit more sophisticated. It's area briefing that is going to give you a little bit more about history, a little bit more about geography, a little bit more about political things, and that's what we were actually studying in this class, and you were presenting when you were having presentation of those 4 selected countries. And then we would like to have some case studies. How does it really look like to live in that country? What does it mean? Then the more sophisticated will then involve role playing. So now it's not that I have this knowledge, but now I'm already thinking that I'm there. What will I do? How will I act in this particular situation? So you can test yourself if you will actually be able to take care of that particular challenge. Cultural assimilation. Provide a written set of situations that the trainee might encounter living or working in the host country. And then finally, you will actually have to go to that particular country and experience firsthand. This is how it looks like. Before they really send you to that, let's say, 4 years or 3 years assignment. Now, to make your life again a little bit more complicated, we have here certain options. So over here on this side, what we have is degree of interaction with host country nationals. It goes from very low, which means that your position when you go overseas, you really will not be, one-on-one on a daily basis with particular people from that country. So if that's the case, then this factual like books, lectures, and area briefing will be enough. Will be sufficient. However, if you will be on a daily basis more and really involved with the local people and really communicated with them, then actually those more developed experiences and training, including this field trip to that particular country, will be more appropriate. And now Alina said, I want money. So here is about money. So the balance sheet approach. Obviously, we already kind of said, you will have a difference in pay because obviously living expenses in Russia may be lower than living expenses in some other countries. So you will have to be compensated for them. But in some countries, you have actually to pay higher taxes than in your host country. And that's especially the case with United States individuals and expatriates, because, as you know, income taxes are much higher in Europe than they are in United States, and particularly certain states in United States, like Florida, doesn't have income tax. And that difference will be then picked by the employer, which means that company will be paying that difference because nobody wants to go if they will be worse off. You know, you want to go if you will be improving your lifestyle, not if you are getting, lower lifestyle. So all those things has to be taken into consideration. And here is, in general, in percentages, how much more, at least from the US perspective, a potential candidate would be offered for that assignment overseas. As you can see here, it goes to 200%, but then also sometimes it actually can go 3 times more than they will be making in the United States. And the reason for that is, this is the base salary. However, you may actually have goods and services differential. That means that, in that country, there will be either higher inflation or everything is more expensive. Housing can be more expensive. Relocation allowance, airfare, company car, and so forth. And again, this is another example with, let's say that you have $80,000 in the United States, and how much will your cost will be if you're living in Chicago, and how much will that be if you will be living in Belgium. And as you can see, there is quite significant difference here, and that's why the company needs to give that allowance, additional payment for that individual. And this is another one. As you can see here, base salary was $150,000, but at the end of the day, they actually pay $407,000 because you have to add all of those additional things that individual. By the way, we're talking about managers here. We're not talking about people who are just starting, like maybe you will be starting. So don't be that excited. And again, all of those things will be some kind of incentive to stimulate individuals to apply for that job and to stimulate the best quality individuals to apply for that job. And again, those are just another way of saying what we have already said. There are those steps in establishing global pay system. What do you think? You have, let's suppose, a Russian company sending a Russian expatriate to work in, let's say, Dubai. And they will be paying that individual 4 times more than that individual will be making here. But not only that, but in that particular subsidiary, you may have other expatriates coming from other countries, let's say India or Bangladesh, and they're all working for you. How much will you be paying those individuals? Same as Russian expatriate? More? Less?
Well, personally, I will pay less because I guess India and Bangladesh are less developed than Russia, and the domestic countries, they getting less than person from Russia get in Russia, and that's why they will be happy to work for me, not 4 times more than like people from Russia, but for example 2 times more than people in Russia get. That's why.
Okay. This is actually, believe it or not, but this is the case. Now you will have people from other parts of the world, and particularly if that country is not developed, that local people will be paid less. People from third countries may be paid less. Now you are paying your own expatriate more. Do you see any problems here? Do you see any problems if you pay 3 different groups of people for the same type of job, different salaries? What will that problem be?
Oh, sorry, I didn't understand the question. You mean? Yeah, okay. Of course, the problem is the salary, the different salary. They are working together, and they're getting the really, really different salary. Hard question, actually.
I think they will have some motivational problems, and one who are paid more will be in not good situation because other people will argue with him maybe about his salary, and their motivation will lower, and their results and efficiency will lower.
Yeah, very true. I mean, that can create some even animosities between different people coming from different countries. And that's one of the reasons why very often nobody talks how much money are you making. So in order to avoid that particular thing of happening, but those are the realities. In some countries in Middle East, talking about political situation, you actually will have to employ certain percentage of local people, which is nothing unusual. What is unusual is that you have to pay them, but they don't necessarily need to work. So that creates another whole layer of potential issues, but those are the requirements of those some Middle Eastern countries, that in order for you to establish your business there, you have to employ local people, you have to pay them, and they really don't need even to work. Now we can see this very short video.
Congratulations, you just graduated, and now you're starting your job search in the international market. Did you know, if you show, write on, or play with your business card during a meeting in Japan, it is seen as disrespectful? However, being invited to join your business partners in a sauna after a meeting means they respect you in Finland. All these cultures have many different traits. The global human resource management of many companies are trying to bridge the gap between cultures to make it a more homogeneous working environment by looking after their employees. Human resource managers go through 3 steps to make sure the company resonates equality. 1. Recruitment. Before you think about where and how you're going to get your dream job, think about the company's recruitment ethics. When taking an ethnocentric approach, companies are looking to place their home country employees into their host country positions. Companies can also take a polycentric view. This is the opposite of ethnocentric, where companies look to directly employ locals. A great mix of both staffing approaches allows companies to use their global human resource management efficiently and helps to bridge and make strong relationships between cultures. This is called geocentric recruitment. 2. How do you get paid? Your payment includes 3 parts, which are base salary, foreign service premium, and allowances. The base salary is the same range as that for a similar position in their home country, but paid by local currency. Foreign service premium is paid as a percentage of your base salary. It can help you live in an unfamiliar country, deal with the new culture and languages, and adapt to new work habits. There are 4 types of allowances you can get, which include the hardship, the housing, the education, as well as the cost of living. You can receive the same level of medical and pension benefits abroad that you receive in your home country. In addition, you also can receive leave, including regular vacation, annual home leave, and rest and rehabilitation leave if you are sent overseas. Lastly, training. Now you will go through training to make sure you are fully integrated into the position. The job will either customize the training or have you go through a standardized procedure depending on its protocol. It may be through passive methods like in a classroom or seminars, or active method through simulations. Now that you feel more comfortable with your job, Human Resource will make sure you develop within the company by reaching your goals and analyzing your performance. It is important Human Resource nurtures your growth in the company to avoid assignment failures, for example, moving abroad. International human resource management is an integral part of a company. It is what makes up the company holistically and what will drive the company to become bigger and better.
Okay, how many of you think that becoming a human resource manager is interesting for you? Okay, let's
Well, from this presentation that I was making, I just was become interested in employment, and it seems like really nice to know about everything that happens in the world. So, and to connect this world and employment together, you have to take a lot of variables that was said before, and it seems like really interesting to know about all this one.
Thank you.
Well, it's just interesting for me to look at this difference in languages, and I mean not only the literal languages, and also the body languages, and the ethic is also a part of the languages. So like the main difference, I wouldn't say the mentality or anything like that. More like in the way how we behave and act, in different societies.
Well, I just like to communicate with people, and it's interesting for me to hire them and think of is the person is appropriate for this position or not, and this different kind of people is make your own experience broad, and it's just interesting job as for me.
Thank you. What do you think multinational corporations, when they're thinking to select a human resource manager in the particular country, will they be looking for their national coming from outside that country, or they will be looking for the person inside that country? And why? Whichever option you go with, tell me why.
I think that companies prefers to find this manager inside the country because he more familiar with the market in this country, and also he understands some feature that could be useful for certain employee, and he would or she would be more qualified in this sphere.
Absolutely right. This is one of the positions that most of the time multinational corporations will hire local instead of sending it from the third country or actually from their home country. Obviously, you have all of those language issues, you have those legal issues, and it's much easier for that individual who already lives in that country, knows those laws, to be there and knows all those nuances, cultural nuances. When you have to say an individual that he or she needs to improve their performance, it's better if it comes from inside. Now, this is also an interesting factor. Who should appraise that expatriate manager? That basically means usually it's done either on a quarterly basis, depends on the company, or on a yearly basis. That individual needs to be evaluated, how he or she is doing their job. Are they fulfilling all those requirements? And who do you think should do that evaluation of that performance of that individual who is now sent abroad? Should it be somebody that works with that individual in that country, or should it be somebody who is from the headquarters? I have a lot of volunteers, but they're all shy tonight. What does make more sense? To evaluate the performance of that individual from the eyes and perspective of the people who are working with that individual on spot in that country, or somebody who is 10,000 kilometers far away.
The first option sounds better, like this local guy who is working with him or her, like, because they're able to contact with each other and they know something about like each other again, and while this foreign employer don't know anything about this worker who is going to go to different country.
So I think on the one hand, it feels more intuitive to ask about alleviating people from the circle of this manager. But on the other hand, you can look at how much effective workers this manager have hired, and how effective his job is. I think you can look at the statistics, maybe. Okay, maybe the ones who are close.
The first variant sounds better, as my colleague said, but something tells me that it's actually been done for the second variant.
Well, actually, it makes sense that those who hire this manager should evaluate them in order to understand is it worth to pay them or not.
Okay, well, they're all good answers. As you can see, I think I have here some very good economies because, you know, in economics, we say on the one hand, this is going to happen, and then we say on the other hand, this is going to happen. And there was one American president who said, please, is anyone going to give me one-handed economies? When I asked them a question that they will give me a straightforward answer, it is this, not like it can happen this way and then it can happen that way. But definitely sometimes we have one on the one hand and on the other hand. And it's, as you can see, I mean, somewhere in between. Definitely those people who are working with that individual on a daily basis can see how he or she is doing much more closely. And not only that they can see how he or she is doing, but they also know the whole environment. Because as you know, sometimes it's not because that we are not performing to our full potential because we are lazy. Sometimes it can be that the circumstances in that particular country are the way that are not allowing us to actually perform much better. So it is a combination of both. I have here the situation of Europe, and as you can see here, labor relations in Europe are very structured and very developed. So obviously, if it is a multinational American company trying to operate in Europe, they will have to deal with much more serious and complicated labor issues than that would be the case in United States. And this table is actually also very important because it does tell you the union density for different countries in the world. So when you look at all of this, who has the lowest union density, which country, and who has the highest union density? Who has the highest? Where is my team from that country? Yes, China has the highest. It's like 92% of workers are actually unionized. Why is it important to know how significant role unions play in that particular country? Why will that be important to know? If it is more unionized or less unionized?
Because if the union is strong in the country, then it will practically dictate the rules to your company.
Very, very true. So the HR manager needs to know that, because if they lay off somebody or don't pay them whatever, a certain amount of money that was like generally accepted by unions in that country, they can be really, really in a serious problem. Which one has the lowest? Malaysia has very low, and as you can see here, Spain also doesn't have that much, and United States is like 15.8, and France is actually here as well. Yeah. Now, these are the issues that HR managers need to deal as well, because if you send your employee, or not only your employee, but if you employ a person in that company that is overseas, being a local or being a global executive or being your own national, unfortunately, we have to deal with those issues of terrorism, safety, and global HR, which basically means how are you going to protect your expatriates? What are you going to do if they were kidnapped? Are you going to pay a ransom? What about the family members? Or if the whole family was kidnapped? So all those are very, very serious problems. They're not only just the book problems or theoretical problems. This unfortunately happens. And of course, in some parts of the world, when they know that that particular company is coming from a very well-developed economy, they actually may kidnap those executives because they know that their company will have money to pay for the ransom. But then again, some countries are not legally saying that they will be actually ever paying the ransom for their expatriates. So, complicated situation. Now, you were thinking it's a problem how to select the right individual and to send that right individual on assignment overseas. But guess what? It is as difficult and as challenging how to repatriate them, how to bring them home. When they were sent abroad, obviously they are dealing with that cultural shock. Cultural shock was, I'm coming from Russia and I go to another country, and then everything is different, from the way they drive their car on the opposite side, to the language, to the cuisine, like climate, all of that is different. So people were faced with that cultural shock. But believe it or not, those very same expatriates are also faced with another cultural shock when they go back home. Why do you think that they're also faced with that cultural shock when they go back home? I mean, it's their home. They should know their culture. They should know the environment. Why will they? It is sometimes even more shocking than that you expect culture shock from another country. So what do you think? What happens to them that they're shocked so much? Okay?
I think that your home place changes during the time you are working abroad, and when you come home to your motherland, you see the differences, and it can strike you. For example, the house where you lived can be destroyed, and the streets can be fully different from where you live here. If you are going to work for a foreign company, for example, for 10 years and more, even laws of your country, even the language, the way how people speak, and their discourse is changing, and you are living, and you are not repatriating, but you are going to the foreign country again, and you repatriate never, in my opinion.
That's a very good observation, and I like your sentence. You are repatriating again in a different country. Anybody else can okay.
Actually, it can be the good shock or the bad one, in my opinion. In the one hand, you are like spend a lot of years, or okay, 1 year in another country, you accept the new rules of life, and it's becoming your rule. And when you're coming back, if like the situation in your country was worse, like the other guy said, of course it will be like the bad shock, like why they are doing this or that. But if in that country where you were before, the situation was most wrong, then in your country can be the good shot.
Thank you. I mean, you're all both right, and it can be a positive and it can be negative. I'm more focusing on this really maybe negative shock. In the way you're absolutely right. It's that the country, my home country, has changed. But as we heard here as well, it's like that I have changed, you know, and that I have changed was influenced by my life in that other country. When I was showing you different characteristics of payment and compensation structure, one of those characteristics was that you may actually have your own driver. You may actually in certain countries have people who are working for you, domestic people, people who are working at your home. So you are not the one who is preparing, who is cleaning, and who is doing all of that. Not it's even your spouse doing all of that. So you may have a little bit higher standard of living in some cases when you move abroad, and then of course it's going to be a shock. So those are all really, really important things, and because of that, company will need to, as they were preparing through those training sessions, preparing potential expatriate to go abroad, with preparing them as far as the culture, political situation, economics, and social things. They also have to prepare them when they come back. And they have to have some even psychological training in that sense. And I think the next one is really an interesting one, repatriation of expatriates. There was a study done, and they asked all those expatriates different questions. And here are the results. I mean, not necessarily a very good results, in a sense that didn't know what position they hold upon return. That's very challenging, because now you have been providing for your family for 4 years, for 3 years. You are used to a certain lifestyle. Now you're going back. And guess what? 99.9% there is high possibility that your previous job is not going to wait for you for those 3 or 4 or 5 years. But even if it waited for you, you are now ready for something higher than what you previously left. So that can be a big shock. Sometimes people will return and they have to take a lower level position. So that's another shock. And because of this, look at this one. There is a really high number of people who were those repatriates, and then they came back home and they're going to leave the company in a matter of 1 year or in a matter of 3 years because of all of those things. One of the reasons why at least American employees don't want to go abroad is because of this out of sight, out of mind. What does that mean? That means that, they feel that they will be missing a possibility for promotion. Because if you are already working in your country, you talk to people on a daily basis. You know who is the boss. You know who is the bigger boss. You know who is the super big boss. And then you present yourself. You're there. All of those things are going to work in your favor. But guess what? If you're 10,000 kilometers far away, they don't know who you are. And that's what they said. No, I don't want to take this assignment because I will be actually missing out of the possibility for promotion. And then those are some final thoughts of this particular human resource management. The best thing is always to have some combination, some mixture. Don't centralize everything. Because if you are centralizing human resource management, guess what? What works in the United States and what works in India is not necessarily going to work in Nigeria. So if we standardize human resource management, everything, the whole procedure, then that will actually then be problematic. And there will be a lot of problems and challenges for HR people to execute that particular policy. There is one, I want to talk about this one, corporate culture. There is one very interesting question. What do you think? If you're working for a multinational corporation and they send you somewhere in the world, which culture is more dominant? Which culture is stronger? Is it the corporate culture? Corporate culture meaning the culture of that company. This is the way we do business no matter what, who, where. Or is it the local culture that is more going to influence your performance? What do you think?
I think that the local culture is more dominant because not in a business, but we have cases when, for example, some local tribes or groups, ethnicities, adopt a new religion to their own cultural aspects, and there maybe we can have the same things when local culture adopt some new international business culture or culture of this company, for example.
Well, I guess it strongly depends on the level of corporate culture development, because in some company we may have a very high developed culture, which all workers do, and they really appreciate this culture. While in the other company we may have just this title and some basic values, but no one cares about it, and therefore it doesn't have such a significant impact on the workers who are abroad.
Thank you. Okay.
Like that he said, I think the mix is the best way. Like the company, it's of course important, but if in a company culture you are respecting, okay, the national culture, it's the best way in my experience.
Thank you. Obviously, there are examples to speak in favor of either of those options, but just now I remember one. When did this happen? I think it was like second part in the 90s when there was one of the biggest mergers in car industry ever, and that was between German company Daimler-Benz and an American company Chrysler. And that's an interesting example because as a chief executive officer, the German individual was appointed to work in United States, and everybody was in a certain way expecting what's going to happen with this merger, because German corporate culture is quite different than American corporate culture, despite the fact that there are obviously some similarities. But at the end of the day, he was hoping that the German corporate culture will be the one who is going to make this merger successful. And in the end of the day, that wasn't really the case, because the local culture in the United States was more dominant. But then you have another companies, of course, and experiences where they're showing that the corporate culture is really so important. And again, to give you another example with a German company, again, car producer, this time not up north in Detroit, but south in Tennessee. One of the characteristics, and I want just to show you this one. I don't know how many of you actually heard. Is anybody familiar with this term co-determination? Have you ever heard about this term co-determination? Co-determination is a very interesting term. And it's, as they say, I was talking to guys in the previous class today, I read one article and they said if you want to understand Russians, you have to understand the significance of drinking tea in Russia. Well, if you want to understand German system and how it functions, you have to understand co-determination. Co-determination is really something very different than what we have, let's say, United States. And this is how it works. After the Second World War, when Germany was destroyed, they didn't have that many options. In a certain way, they wanted to develop their country, and in order to develop their country, they realized, okay, how are we going to do it? If I say I'm a boss and you're just a simple worker, is that going to work? And they realized that that is not going to work in the right way. So they said, actually, we are all here with a simple goal. We want to rebuild our country. And that thing of working together with the workers and with managers was actually then later on transferred to their corporate culture. What does that mean? That means on their board of directors. You have members of the banking industry on one side, and then you have managers. Then you have a representative of the managers on the other side. But co-determination means the following. They introduce the manager who is representing the workers. So basically, that's very unique, so that the workers' voice will be heard, and then you wouldn't be able to make this the decision if you don't follow that particular voice as well. Very different than United States, when obviously when we have unions, we have as not necessarily cooperation between those two groups of union workers and the management, but it's mostly conflict. This one, co-determination, said, no, we don't want conflict. We want co-determination. We want to work together. So when a German company came to Tennessee, they actually wanted to introduce this co-determination. And there was a really big campaign to not allow that the workers in the company, German company operating in the United States, will vote. Even when they voted, they were actually saying, no, this is not appropriate for our society. So you can see how actually in both cases, in a certain way, the corporate culture wanted to show that it is more important, but at the end of the day, it was actually the local culture that was more significant. Now, before we finish for tonight, I will like a few comments. What did you get from tonight's presentation, and how many of you are going now to look at those ads and apply to those potential jobs to go somewhere and work somewhere abroad? So one lesson that you learned tonight, one thing that you learned tonight that was interesting for you. Something new, something different, or maybe not new and maybe different, but it was like important for you to review your knowledge of that thing. What will that be?
I have never really thought about HR before, and this division between locals and host countries, it was useful for me to know.
I need 2 more. Okay.
The main point I got was that HR managers should take into consideration unions that exist in this country.
And the last one. Who wants to be important last one? Maybe some visitors. Maybe some visitors. Not again. Oh my God. Thank you for coming anyway. Okay. Yes. Maybe some traditional visitors.
Actually, this question about the HR manager, for me now is really important. It's a really open question. And now I realize it that I want to hire the local HR manager. For me, it was really important.
Well, I don't want to spoil this important decision now. And thank you all for coming, and then see you next week. Take care. Bye.